It's Thursday, February 12th, 2026. And, if you're looking at your calendar and then at the press release that just dropped out of Mogadishu, you might be doing a bit of a double take.
A double take is putting it mildly.
We have a situation developing in the Horn of Africa that is, well, it's a logistical and political tightrope walk. I mean, the likes of which we haven't seen in a good while.
It is the very definition of high stakes. We are looking at an electoral timeline that's so compressed, it's almost suffocating.
Right. So the headline, on the surface, it seems simple enough. Somalia's National Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, the NIEBC, has officially scheduled state-level local government council elections.
And they gave us a date.
They dropped the date, April 2026.
April 2026.
Which is, what, effectively 8 weeks from now? But here's the kicker, and this is why we're doing this deep dive today. These elections are scheduled to take place exactly 1 month before President Hassan Sheikh Mohammed's current term expires in May.
And that's the crucial context. That's everything. Normally, you want a buffer, right? You want a cooling off period between, say, local elections and the end of a presidential mandate.
Sure.
Here, there is no buffer. It is a direct collision course.
It feels like they're trying to land a jumbo jet on a helipad.
That's a great way to put it.
You have this massive democratic exercise registering voters, validating rolls, setting up polling stations, all of it crammed into the absolute twilight hours of a presidency.
And you have to assume that timing isn't accidental. It creates a massive amount of friction. And we aren't just talking about, the logistics of moving ballot boxes. We're looking at a schedule that effectively forces a confrontation between the Electoral Board's technical mandate and the broader political reality.
Okay, so let's look at the source material, specifically the announcement from the commission chairman, Abdikarim Ahmed Hassan. He's the man in the hot seat here.
He certainly is.
When you read his statement, he doesn't sound like a man who is panicking. He sounds determined.
Determined is one way to put it.
Yeah.
He is projecting institutional confidence. His statement is very specific.
How so?
He says, within the next 2 months, by the end of April, he's not offering a window, he's setting a hard deadline. And he emphasizes that preparations are already underway, and the goal is a process that is free, fair, and credible.
Free, fair, and credible. That is the mantra, isn't it? But let's be real for a second. Can you actually guarantee credible in 8 weeks in a landscape as fractured as this?
That is the million-dollar question.
We aren't talking about holding a vote in a stable unitary state. We are talking about Somalia, where regional dynamics are everything.
And credibility in this context, it relies so heavily on inclusivity. If you hold an election and key players just sit it out, or if the registration doesn't reach enough people,
then the whole thing just falls apart.
The credibility evaporates no matter what the chairman says. And that's where the sort of geography of this announcement becomes so fascinating.
I noticed that too. The commission didn't just give a date. They gave us a map. They confirmed voter registration is resuming in very specific cities. Baidoa, Johar, and Dusamareb.
Baidoa, Johar, Dusamareb. This is not a random list of cities.
No, it's highly specific. Baidoa is the anchor of Southwest State. Johor is the administrative capital of Hirshabelle.
And Dusamareb is the heart of Galmudug.
These are all areas where the federal government has, let's just say, a working relationship with the local administrations.
Precisely. By planting the flag in these specific urban centers, the commission is signaling where it believes it can operate effectively. But you have to notice who is missing from that list.
Right.
In the immediate headline about resuming registration, we aren't seeing a massive rollout announced for, say, Garo and Puntland or Kismayo and Jubaland.
And that silence speaks volumes. We'll get to that in a minute. But sticking with where they are going, the source says there's an expansion. They aren't just reopening old centers.
They're adding districts, 12 additional districts.
Which brings the total up to 35 registration districts. Now, on paper, that looks like progress. More districts, more access. But if I'm a skeptic...
And you usually are.
Is this really about access, or is it about changing the political math?
I think it can be both. The commission states that this expansion came after consultation with regional leaders. That is a key phrase. It implies they aren't just doing this unilaterally from Mogadishu.
So they're claiming buy-in.
They're claiming buy-in from those specific states, Southwest, Hirshabelle, Galmudug. By adding 12 districts, they are effectively trying to broaden the franchise to get more people into the system before that April deadline hits.
It's an aggressive push for legitimacy, then. If you can point to a voter roll that's way bigger than before, it makes it harder for the opposition to say the whole process is invalid.
Exactly. It's a numbers game.
Yeah.
Chairman Hassan also mentions working with registered political parties and civil society organizations to ensure transparency.
Yeah.
He's trying to build a fortress of procedure.
A fortress of procedure. I like that.
He wants to be able to say, look, we followed the law, we expanded access, we had observers.
He's building a shield against the inevitable political backlash, because that backlash is already here. Let's pivot to the Somali Future Council.
Yes, this is where the technical timeline runs headfirst into a political brick wall. The Somali Future Council isn't just some random group of critics. We're talking about representatives from Puntland and Jubaland.
The heavyweights.
Absolutely. These are the federal member states that have been most vocal about preserving the federal structure against what they see as, centralization from the top.
And the source material highlights a really severe conflict between this council and the federal government over the electoral framework.
That's the heart of it.
We keep seeing this phrase, recent constitutional amendments. The government keeps waving these amendments around like a permission slip. But the Somali Future Council is looking at that same piece of paper and calling it a forgery.
That is the core of the dispute. The federal government's position is that Parliament passed these amendments, the Constitution has been revised, and therefore they have a legal mandate to move toward a multi-party electoral system.
They're framing it as the law of the land.
It is the law of the land, according to them.
And this multi-party electoral system is sort of the holy grail here, isn't it? Moving away from the old 4.5 clan formula toward a system where parties actually compete. In theory, that's modernization.
In theory, yes.
Yeah.
It's the big shift from selection to election. But the Somali Future Council argues that you can't just legislate that shift from the top down without a broad-based political consensus.
So they're saying pump the brakes.
Their stance, as noted in the sources, is that the whole process has to be based on a negotiated agreement.
Negotiated agreement, which is code for stop reading your new constitution and sit down with us to make a deal.
Correct. They are questioning the legitimacy of the constitutional changes themselves. They argue that if the rules of the game were changed without their full consent, then any election played by those new rules is, by definition, invalid.
So when the NIEBC says, we're holding elections in April based on the revised framework,
the council hears, we are forcing a system on you that you already rejected.
it's a classic sovereignty trap. The federal government says, we are the state, we have the authority. And the regions say, the state is a federation and you are overstepping.
And this is why those specific cities, Baidoa, Johor, Dusamareb matter so much. The government is moving forward where it can.
Right.
They're hoping that by creating facts on the ground holding actual elections in 35 districts, they can render the opposition's arguments obsolete. It's a strategy of momentum.
But isn't that incredibly risky? I mean, if Puntland and Jubaland are actively calling for a halt and the government just plows ahead with an April vote, aren't we looking at a bifurcated country?
That is the fork in the road that the analysis describes. The source explicitly lays out two paths. Path one is that these ongoing talks actually result in a new political agreement.
The miracle scenario. Everyone hugs it out in the next 8 weeks.
Well, stranger things have happened, but the window is closing fast. That path requires the government to concede that the constitutional amendments aren't enough on their own.
And what about path two?
Path two is that the elections proceed under the current arrangements without a new agreement. The government just says, the train is leaving the station, get on or get left behind.
And that leads us right back to that May deadline, because if the government takes path two full steam ahead and holds these elections in April, what happens in May when the president's term ends?
This is where all the scrutiny comes in.
Mm-hmm.
If the April elections are successful, technically successful, the president can claim a massive victory.
Right.
He can say, I delivered democracy. I delivered the first real multi-party local elections. That gives him immense political capital right at the moment his term is ending.
It almost acts as a renewal of his mandate, even if a presidential vote hasn't happened. It changes the narrative from your time is up to, look, the system is working, let's keep going.
Exactly. But now flip that coin. If the April elections are a disaster, if there are boycotts, security failures, or if the Somali Future Council successfully delegitimizes the whole process,
Then what?
then the president reaches the end of his term in May with a failed experiment on his hands. He has no mandate, no success story, and a very, very furious opposition.
It really is an all-or-nothing bet, and I want to go back to this multi-party concept for a second. The government is pushing it so hard. Why is it so threatening to the opposition? Why not just, form a party and compete?
Because in a fragile political ecosystem, the rules of party formation and the boundaries of the districts, they can determine the winner before a single vote is even cast. The opposition fears that this multi-party system, as it's currently designed, is just a vehicle for centralization. If the federal government controls the commission that registers the parties, and it controls the commission that draws the boundaries,
Then the multi-party system just becomes a way to launder power.
that's the fear. The opposition prefers the negotiated agreement because that model relies on power sharing between established blocs, the states, the clans. It's messy, but it guarantees them a seat at the table.
Whereas the multi-party system introduces uncertainty.
A lot of uncertainty. It threatens the established power dynamics. So when Chairman Hassan says free and fair, the opposition is asking, fair for who?
So we have two conversations happening past each other. The commission is talking about logistics, dates, districts, registration.
Right, the technical detail.
And the opposition is talking about law, constitutions, agreements, the very nature of federalism.
And the president is just watching the clock tick down to May.
What does consensus even look like at this stage? Is it just a delay?
A delay is certainly one version of consensus. They could all agree to postpone the April vote to allow for more talks. But the government seems completely allergic to that idea right now.
They feel they have the momentum.
They do. Another version of consensus could be a hybrid model. So, holding elections in the willing states while negotiating some kind of special status for Puntland and Jubaland.
But that just creates a fragmented country.
It does. But Somalia has functioned on fragmentation for a long time. The danger here is that this April 2026 date isn't just a goal, it's a line in the sand. If the government crosses that line alone, without the future council, it effectively declares that it can operate without the consent of all its members.
And that's a fundamental shift in the definition of the Somali state.
It's an existential moment disguised as a municipal election.
That is a perfect way to put it. Let's just circle back to voter registration for a second. The source emphasizes they are resuming registration. That implies it was paused.
Well, the pause is usually politics, or security, or a lack of funding. Restarting it now, specifically in February, is the logistical trigger.
Yeah.
You can't have an election in April if you don't have a voter roll in March.
So this resumption is the point of no return.
Pretty much. Once you spend the money and deploy the teams to Baidoa or Dusum Arab, it is very expensive, politically and financially, to just stop. The machine is turned on now.
So for you, the listener, the thing to do is keep an eye on those specific cities. If we start seeing reports of protests in Baidoa, or if the regional president of Jubaland makes a statement condemning the registration.
That is the friction heating up. That's the sign.
And what about the regular person in Johor? For them, this isn't just high politics. This is about electing their local council.
And that is both the tragedy and the hope of it. Local council elections are supposed to be about, garbage collection, local roads, schools. But in this environment, that simple act of voting is being loaded with so much national geopolitical weight.
It puts a lot of pressure on the ballot box.
It does. And the source notes that the outcome will influence Somalia's next phase of governance and stability. That is not hyperbole. If this goes well, it sets a template. It proves you can hold direct elections.
And if it goes badly,
It reinforces the idea that Somalia isn't ready for this, and it sends everyone retreating back to their clan strongholds. A massive regression.
you can really see the logic on both sides. The government has a term ending. They need to show results. The opposition has a federal structure to protect. They need to ensure they aren't erased.
And usually these things are solved in a back room over tea, with no deadlines. But the Constitution has imposed a hard deadline. May 2026, the president's term expires. That creates this race against the clock that doesn't allow for the usual endless negotiation.
So April is the preamble to May.
The local election is the dress rehearsal for the transition of power, or the retention of power.
Right. If the government pulls off April, the argument for keeping the administration in place becomes very strong. Don't change horses in the middle of a successful transition.
That is certainly a card they could play. It's a 3D chess game being played at sprint speeds.
So to bring it all together for you, we have the NIEBC announcing local elections for April 2026. We have 35 districts getting ready to vote. We have this fierce constitutional dispute between the federal government and the Somali Future Council over whether these elections are even legal.
And we have the president's term expiring in May, turning the whole thing into a ticking time bomb. It's a technical process caught in a political hurricane.
And the ultimate question isn't just who wins the council seats, it's whether the system itself survives this stress test.
If they can pull this off, a free, fair, multi-party election on this timeline, It will be a historic achievement. If they fail, it could unravel the progress of the last 4 years.
I want to leave you with a final thought to chew on. We always obsess over the who is the president, who is the opposition, but maybe we should look at the what. What is being built here?
Or what's being dismantled.
Exactly. With the clock ticking down to the final weeks of the president's term, you have to ask, will this push for a multi-party system, this rapid forced modernization, actually lead to the stability everyone claims to want?
Or will the lack of consensus create a new hurdle that trips the country right at the finish line?
Efficiency versus consensus. And in April, we find out which one wins. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
It's a complex story, but one to watch closely.
We'll see you on the next one.